What are we doing with this Minnesota Vikings team? There's a lot of different angles to tackle tonight. A lot has been made recently about the lack of draft success from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, but we're going to reframe the conversation a little bit. We're going to talk about the latest news with Carson Wentz, how that impacts J.J. McCarthy, and it could impact Max Brosmer as well. We got a lot to talk about, so strap in and welcome to another episode of The Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Real Forno Show, sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy, where with the promo code FORNO, you can get a free $100 in bonus credits with your first $5 play. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave, and we got a lot to get to tonight. It has been a few days since the Minnesota Vikings decided to embarrass us on national television once again with the 37-10 loss to the Los Angeles Chargers, but there's still a lot to talk about coming out of that game, and I think we can't bury the lead here. We have to talk about Carson Wentz, who was placed on injured reserve just a few hours before this recording, and, well, he is out for the season with that left shoulder injury. And what was really fascinating was the details that came out about what the injury was. When I first saw, okay, he's out for the season because he needs surgery, my initial thought was, okay, torn labrum. Torn labrum is really painful, but it's something you can play through because you really can't damage it anymore. Once it's torn, it's torn. Baker Mayfield played with that injury in 2021, his last season with the Cleveland Browns, and it was a big reason why he was not able to return to the Cleveland Browns. One reason why they decided to move on from him. And it was this other nugget from Ian Rappaport, and all the other insiders had it as well. Well, in the first half of the London game, when Wentz initially suffered the injury, he suffered a dislocation that tore the labrum, but it also fractured his shoulder socket. Why was this guy playing football? And I say that kind of facetiously and rhetorically because I'm going to give you the answer. This was probably his last chance to be a starting quarterback. Other than, hey, he gets to be a backup somewhere and then he gets a elongated period of time. But theoretically, well, this is it. You got to earn whatever potential chance at being a starter you can get again. And you and I can sit here and talk, oh, he's not going to ever be a starter again. That ship has long sailed. But that's not how these guys think. That's not how they approach things. And with this quarterback renaissance we're seeing from players like Sam Darnold, which I know hurts a lot of us, Daniel Jones, and the aforementioned Baker Mayfield, well, when you have those guys have this resurgence and come back with a vengeance and play way better football, why wouldn't Carson Wentz talk to his agent and be like, why can't that be me? And when you come into a situation like Minnesota, which theoretically is phenomenal, well, there's a lot of elements to that. Like, okay, if I play really well here, well, guess what? The other two guys that just left here are playing great football. So then somebody will give me a chance and I can be the next success story. It didn't happen. It didn't happen for a multitude of reasons, and that injury was certainly a big one. But I think we need to tip our cap to Carson Wentz and be like, you know what? Good for you, man. Thanks for giving us your all, and thanks for putting all that effort out there to be a winning quarterback for this football team. It didn't work. It was obvious it didn't work. We watched the games. But his grit, determination, and will to win out there on that football field every week deserves our respect, because he didn't have to put his body through that. He didn't have to go that hard with that kind of injury to try and play through it. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. Now, he also deserves a lot of the team deserves a lot of criticism, because now I believe that they were not putting him in harm's way to be re-injured. Kevin O'Connell talked after the game how he's in constant communication with Wentz and head trainer Tyler Williams about, hey, can you keep going? Is it still safe for him to play? The resounding answer was he's not going to hurt or damage the shoulder anymore. It's all about pain tolerance was essentially his answer. And I think at a certain point, and it's taken me a few days to kind of get there because it's like, look, these are grown men. It's really hard to be that voice of reason for a grown ass man of 32 years old who's a hyper competitive athlete to say, dog, you need to get out of the game because you're not doing yourself any service right now. You are injured beyond reason, and I need to protect you. It's a very difficult conversation to have. It's a difficult conversation to have when it's like a parent and child. Be like, no, you're hurt. I'm not going to let you go ride your bike today. But this is a whole different scenario with grown men. And I think from a human standpoint, I think we should have expected more from Kevin O'Connell. That is way easy to say when you're sitting in this chair behind this microphone and camera. But it was obvious that Wentz was giving his all and he had nothing left to give. And in hindsight, which is always 2020, O'Connell should have taken him out and just dealt with whatever repercussions happened with Brosmer. If he stunk, you deal with that. If he's elite and all of a sudden there's a quarterback controversy, you deal with that. But from a human perspective, he should have taken him out of the game. You just should have taken him out of the game. And I think that one's going to sit with me a little bit. The fact that he didn't take him out. But at the end of the day, if Wentz is like, no, I'm going to play, I'm going to fight, and we're going to try and get back in this thing, it's a difficult thing to say, no, you're done. I'm taking you out. When somebody has that kind of drive and passion and want to be better and want to help the team succeed. And this is where that culture comes into play. You trust your players. The players trust you. Does this fracture that a little bit? Because when you watch Wentz and he comes off of the sidelines and he throws his helmet down, just grimacing. And Kirk Herbstreit on the broadcast was ridiculous in calling him out. You're the leader of this team. Dog, he's getting absolutely murdered out there. And he's in obvious pain. He's not doing it because he's frustrated. He's doing it because he's hurt. I thought, and Herbstreit as an announcer is fine most of the time, but he goes off on these ridiculous tangents that just make him sound like a conspiracy theorist. And it's just, no, he's hurt. He's in pain. Who cares? You know what? If that was Justin Herbert doing it on the other side, who cares? The dude's in pain. I don't care that he throws his helmet. I didn't care that Wentz threw his helmet. Hell, I would have thrown my helmet if I was in that spot. But I do think the Vikings will look back on this and realize, hey, we should have just done better by the human. Even if, hey, it says he can play, he's not going to hurt the shoulder more. They could have done more. And now Wentz is about to have his fourth child apparently this week. And he's having, I believe he had the surgery today. Not exactly a great scenario. You're gonna be going into the delivery room with your wife with a shoulder in a sling. Can't hold your kid without assistance. Like that sucks. But I mean, him playing this game wasn't going to make that any easier. He was still gonna have to have the surgery anyways. But man, I've never really had to question or felt the need to question KOC from a decision-making standpoint like this before. And now I'm going to probably find myself second-guessing things moving forward for a little bit because, and like I said earlier, it took me a little bit to get to this point because it's like, okay, if Wentz says, hey, I'm good, I'm going back in, you just gut it out. And you can make the argument from a football perspective. Look, you want McCarthy to have this base back underneath him and not screw up mechanically. And we talked about that with how overcompensation can happen when you have leg injuries. I get that too. And Wentz is just like, oh, you're kind of, for lack of a better term, a sacrificial lamb in this perspective where, look, just go out, just play the game. We're going to get through it. And then we're going to go to McCarthy against the Lions. You just could have put in Brosmer. And you should have put in Brosmer. We talked about why on the post-game show, live at the 2-minute warning, which you guys should all go check out, why they didn't do that. And you know what? They still should have done it, because from a human perspective, they should have been better for Carson Wentz. And I'm going to hold on to that for a little bit. Dave, Carson Wentz era is over. What are your thoughts?
I'm glad it's over. Now,
Me
I don't
too.
wish Carson Wentz, he was obviously in pain, and torn labrum and fractured socket has got to be obviously painful, and I wish him the best in his recovery. But I'm glad it's over. I do believe KOC should have yanked him long time ago and put in Brosmer. And whatever's going on there, we don't know exactly, but it needs to have been done. There's the accusation that KOC soft, S-A-W-F-T, soft. Well, does this change that in any sort of perception? Or is that just about how he calls plays? It's an interesting situation. Hopefully, J.J. McCarthy comes back and turns into a legend, and we win 8 or 9 games, and we make the playoffs. But, hey, I can get drunk like the best of us.
You and me both. I'm not really sure, but I'm glad you kind of mentioned the play calling thing, because I did some research, Dave. And as Odie wants some pets really quick, I'm going to see if I can scoop him up at some point so everybody can get their eyes on Mr. Odie boy, because he's just such a sweet boy. I did some research on some short yardage stuff.
Biggs.
Oh, thank you, Biggs.
And we will get to that.
You know what? Let's do that first. So I have a short list. I think Desmond Ridder is going to be at the top of that short list because he was already in your building this year. I think Brett Rippon is going to be at the top of that short list. He's on the Indianapolis Colts practice squad. And look, we can hate it and whatever, but Kirk Cousins is on that list too. There's a lot of red tape with the Kirk Cousins thing. Michael Penix is banged up. He's got a bruised knee bone. I think that's how they classified it. It's a bruised knee. I'm not quite sure. The only knee bone that you have is like the kneecap, but he's got a bone bruise in his knee somewhere. Then that's really just about pain tolerance. It's not a structural thing. So they're not going to trade Cousins until he's back, but you only have 8 days to make that move because the trade deadline is next week. It's next Tuesday. That's coming up real freaking quick. So what will the Vikings end up doing? I don't know, but they're going to bring in somebody. And here's the kicker. They can't sign anybody to the practice squad that is already on a practice squad, which means Brett Rippon would have to go right to the main roster. But they can sign for anyone off any practice squad if they activate them on the main 53, because that's considered a promotion. And that's always been a thing. So Brett Rippon is at the top of the list. I do think you'd have Desmond Ridder there too, because he's been in the building. Both those guys have been in the building. Cousins as well. The funniest outcome would be Easton Stick, who I can't remember which practice squad he's on. He might actually be on the Falcons practice squad. But it would be funny that Easton Stick succeeded Carson Wentz at NDSU, and then all of a sudden he is going to succeed Carson Wentz with the Minnesota Vikings. And of course, it'll just make Arif Hassan go bananas. And we're always in favor of making Arif Hassan go bananas. So that's something to watch for. I don't know if and when they'll make the move. I would expect Ridder to be on the practice squad shortly. Will they want to bring one to the active roster? We'll find out. I think they're going to wait until they also claimed Ben Sims off of waivers. If you remember Ben Sims, he was with the Vikings in training camp in 23 and he was good. but they just didn't have a roster spot for him. And then the Packers claimed him. And then he was kind of like their fourth tight end. And they finally moved on, and the Vikings bring him back. And with Ben Jurasek just kind of there and Josh Oliver injured, he's a good piece to have. I don't think you want to trust Jurasek right now. So because of that, it just all kind of adds up. But I want to talk about some of this play calling stuff because the whole theme of the show is like meh or bad. And one of the reasons we're talking about it is because, look, this team right now isn't very good. And it could be very good, but it's just not right now. So why? And I wrote about some of the Vikings' shortcomings in short yardage situations. I do think as a overall whole, when you look at Kevin O'Connell's play calls individually, he's not really calling bad plays on an individual basis. And I think what it boils down to is something you really aren't going to be able to fix right now. The play designs themselves, as far as like the run game, need some improvement. And I think they need some coaching improvement too. Because when you watch, he's calling a lot more pass plays over, and credit Alec Lewis for these. He pulled some stats because I would love to have access to True Media, but I know The Athletic does, and I'm 99% sure this is where those came from. They have the highest pass rate since Kevin O'Connell took the job in the NFL and the lowest run rate. Of course, if you have the highest pass rate, you're going to have the lowest run rate. That makes complete sense. 51.2% of plays second or third down and 2 or less have been passes. Now, there's merit to throwing the ball on those short yardage situations when you have a plan after that play. So what a lot of teams will do, and especially once they get like to about the 40-yard line, you take shots. Hey, second down and 2, play action, let's throw a shot. And then guess what? If you miss it, you just have 3rd and 2. Or if you miss 3rd and 2, you have 4th and 2. So it's in a sequence of plays, which is one of the reasons why I don't want to. I'm not going to completely absolve of O'Connell with the play calling aspect, but when I watch a lot of these individual plays, like in isolation, the play calls are fine. But when you look at a large data set like this, you're looking at a problem and you have to figure out a way to fix it. And my biggest read here is the offensive line. Dave, they're just not getting any push. Now, this year, I think you can credit a lot of that to the fact that, look, they're just playing an immense amount of backups on the offensive line, and those dudes just aren't able to push. They aren't able to get that forward momentum. But at a certain point, there's only so many excuses you can make, because once they do show up, once you theoretically get Ryan Kelly back, Darrison O'Neal back, are they going to be able to move people? Are they going to be able to push people forward and out of the way? I don't know. I don't think any of us know. And that's a huge factor in this conversation. Because if you're not able to get any push, that's why the run game's not working. And even though I do think they could use some freshening up from a schematic perspective, if you can't move guys, what does it matter? And you have Jordan Mason, who I really like, but he's a one-cut physical kind of back, and he is having to stretch things out to the outside way too much, and he's getting caught, and he's getting tackled. And those runs aren't doing anything. Now, when Aaron Jones runs those, it's more than fine because of who he is and what he can do. But I think some of the play designs for these guys and how they're coaching them and how they're asking them to block and how they're getting that forward movement, those are the biggest issues here. And I think O'Connell as a whole should trust his run game more. But I got to ask the question, how much would you trust the run game? And if your answer is, I get why he doesn't, then that's another layer to this conversation where we need to ask ourselves, okay, why doesn't Kevin O'Connell trust the run game? And how responsible is he for it? Or is it just that he hired the wrong people and they're not doing a good enough job? And this is a conversation that's a difficult one to have for multiple reasons. One, you're asking for people to lose their jobs. People that are seemingly good-hearted people. Chris Cooper, the offensive line coach, has been here 4 years. Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator, has been here 4 years. But when you continue to have the same kind of results in key moments, How are you trying to fix it? How are you improving? And quite frankly, they're not improving. They're not figuring it out. Maybe you just need to get new voices in the room, not because they're bad people or coaches, but because you need to find new solutions to outstanding problems. It's once you get new eyes on a situation, sometimes that can be all the clarity you need because Dave, you and I can be the smartest guys in the room, but if we keep looking at the same problem over and over and over again, like I could bring my wife in and she could point out the problem in 3 seconds because she's never seen it before. Like maybe that's the path that the Vikings need to take here because when you look at some of these, their success rate is also lowest in the NFL over the last 4 years, 55.7%. That's bad. Now, 55% success rate over the course of a full game is phenomenal, but this is 2nd and 2 and 3rd and 2. You need to be able to succeed in those when you're a good offense. This year on just those plays, 2nd and short, 2 or fewer, and 3rd and 2 or fewer, 35 plays, 18 pass attempts, most in the NFL, 15 rush attempts, 28th in the NFL, 17 first downs, which is 29th, and a success rate of 44.7%. And to put that in perspective, because we talked about the 55.7 from the course of the last 4 years, the league average this season is 63.3%. So you're looking at an offense that is operating almost 20% less successful than the league average in short yardage situations. One of the examples I brought up in the piece, which you can go check out at A2Zsports.com, is the 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, and 4th and 1 from the Eagles game. And I thought it was an interesting one to kind of take a look at because it was 3 straight calls. They were all pass plays. The first one was the fade route to Justin Jefferson. That was a check because they got single coverage against the slot corner. I don't care how good Cooper DeJean is. He's a slot corner. You take that matchup and you hope Jefferson wins. And you know what? DeJean made a great play. And defense gets paid too. So that was a good play from the Eagles. But you had an opportunity and he took it. And I thought it was a smart move. 3rd and 1. It was a flood concept where you're flooding all your receivers in with like not a traditional high-low, but you have the 3 levels. So it's a flood levels concept. And guess what? It was covered, so he threw it away. You know what? Good stuff. And then 4th down was that Blake Brandel hold, but Jalen Nailor got open on the goal line. It was a touchdown. So we believe he called a run on that 2nd down play, but it was checked out of, which, you know what? I think we'd all agree with that check. You get Jefferson single covered. Trust your superstar. 3rd down. Didn't love the play call. I'm not saying you should have just ran it there. I didn't like the play call. I don't like flood concepts. I don't like rollouts like that in short spaces because you just are limiting so much of what you can do. And you don't have a guy in Wentz who can do a throwback. Now, if you had a quarterback who can do a throwback, then we're having a different conversation because now the whole field opens up. 4th down, it's a touchdown. I don't think you can really argue against that play call. And that's why I think it's not as simple as O'Connell needs to fix his play calling strategy. I think you need to figure out why he's having this play calling strategy. Because I think the why here is the real answer. And the why being, well, he doesn't trust the run game. And I think that boils down to what the offensive line is being taught and how they're being developed. Because they are not moving guys forward enough. They're not moving guys out of the way. And you know what, Dave? That was a huge problem last year when the Vikings were 19th in red zone percentage at about 55. And going into that Eagles game, they were at 66.7%. Small sample size. And it came down to earth pretty quick. But I want to see improvement from how the offensive line is moving people around. To me, that's going to be the biggest factor in this next step. And tough part is I don't think that they're going to really be able to fix this in season. And that sucks.
But after that embarrassing loss, we expected at least somebody to be fired or moved or something. And we got nothing. Except for Wentz to IR today.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. I don't think that this team is in a position to where you need to make that midseason firing. I think if this were to happen again next year, I think then you need to make those kind of moves.
But like you said, Wes Phillips has been there 4 years. Chris Cooper's been there 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, something's wrong. And the head coach isn't going to fire himself, so he's got to fire somebody. You would think.
Yeah. I think that's going to be more of an off-season conversation. And the tough part is I have
and he'll blow it like he did with Donishell.
I think it's an interesting conversation with firing these coaches, because when you look at the like what the coaches are asked to do, I think we know what Wes Phillips is asked to do, and I think it's exactly what Kevin O'Connell was doing in Los Angeles, which is mainly play design and game planning and like in-game adjustments and helping assist O'Connell with the play calling and helping assist and getting the right personnel groupings together and sending them on the field. A lot of that kind of stuff. And I do believe that has a lot of merit, but I think if you're going to make changes on an offense that could use a little bit of improvement, I think he's probably the guy. Josh McCown, you want to try and keep as much continuity on quarterback coach as you can. And quarterback coaches are responsible for completely different things. And I think he probably makes the most sense to replace. And it's not because he's bad. I think this room needs new voices. And this is from an outside perspective looking in. And there is a chance that I'm not right in some of these assessments because it's from an outside perspective looking in. Cooper has also been here 4 years. He's from the Mike Munchak tree. He was Mike Munchak's assistant in Denver. People are like, well, why don't you just hire Munchak? Munchak's retired now, I believe. So you got the next best thing in Cooper. And I think Cooper's a good guy. But you see Ed Ingram going to Houston and playing pretty well. Now all of a sudden, you have these guys that are just kind of, there's some struggles there. What do you do? And it's hard to find good O-line coaches, but if you can find an improvement, I think you got to try, because the offensive line and how they are moving guys around is a really big factor here.
I was watching one of the games this weekend, and it may have been last night, but they talk about getting the O-line to push people. He wants his offensive line to push people 2-3 yards downfield every play, right? Not a pass play, every run play. He wants to see the mass move. And that should be a goal of any offensive line coach. But we don't hear anything like that coming out of our Vikings. And that's a shame. So, who knows? We need to move on in the show to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And this is a conversation I really didn't want to have until after the season, because I really don't like doing like deep dive kind of draft stuff until the season's done. But I'm going to be honest, I felt the need to, because our mentions and comments here at Vikings First and SKOL have been filled with it, which please like, subscribe, ring the bell for all the notifications. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. And then not only that, but you have people on Twitter just screaming fire Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Look, you can be frustrated with him all you want. He's 37-21 operating this team, being in charge of the coaching staff and the roster. You're not getting it, and it's not going to happen. He's succeeding. It doesn't matter if you think he sucks at drafting. He's got a good team and they're winning football games. He's not going to be replaced. And I felt the need to kind of look at it from this perspective, Dave. Is this drafting record really as bad as we think it is?
It's not good.
I think it's okay-ish. And let me kind of provide some of the context as to kind of what I mean by that. I referenced an article from Ward Ludford of the Daily Norseman. and kind of understanding.
Warren's a smart young man. Yes,
he is. Understanding how often draft picks succeed. And look, we can't beat around the bush. The 2022 draft was bad. The best player from it was Jalen Nailor, who's a hit. And guess what? Ty Chandler, also a hit. But we also have to remember the context of what a hit is for each individual round. That's a big factor here. He missed on Lewis Cine. We all missed on Lewis Cine. Everybody thought it was a great pick. Now, we could talk all we want about the trade and that kind of stuff. Kwesi has mentioned the trade, and he's talked about how he basically tried to, like, he talked to Kevin O'Connell about the 33-0 comeback against the Colts. And like, well, I think I tried to do that in the 2022 draft. And he hasn't done that since. He's learned from that. He's learned from his mistake. He's approached these drafts differently. And because he's done that, that's a big factor. And I think when you look at the 2023 class and the 2024 class, you can tell he's approaching things differently with the players he's drafting and how he's moving up and down the board. He is just trying to be very, very, what's the word? I don't remember the word. He's trying to be like very direct and very articulate with how he's making his moves. And when you look at it,
intentional.
That's the word. Thank you. So like first round picks, they should be an immediate contributor and long-term starter, with the exception being a quarterback. Okay. That's what you should be expecting from your first round pick. They should be an immediate contributor and a cornerstone of your franchise. Second round pick, early contributor, starter in year 2 or 3 is kind of the ideal. If they start earlier, that's great. They don't have to be starters year 1. Same with third round picks. Fourth round picks, you want them to be a rotational player and an immediate special teamer. Same with fifth round picks. If you get special teams contributor and a depth player out of 6th and 7th round picks, you've hit. Now, you want everybody to be a starter. You want everybody to be a superstar. You want to find a Stephon Diggs and a Tom Brady in the 5th and 6th round. Reality is you don't find those guys very often. And it's okay that you don't find those guys very often. Why? Because it happens. Like it's just a difficult process. And overall, the Vikings have actually had more hits than you think. This from Warren, that article I mentioned, 20.2% of draft picks are deemed what he considered good selections, which means they provided enough value and they provided positive elements for your team. Now, it's also flawed because by that measure, how he was pursuing the study, Christian Ponder is also deemed a good draft pick. So it's not a completely perfect study, but it gives you a good encapsulation on what the draft is. So if 20.2% of draft picks are good, out of about 260 draft picks, that leaves about 53 of them that are good draft picks. Of those, and now he did a 20-year sample, 16.7% of all draft picks don't even play for the team that they were drafted by. Let that sink in. 1 out of every 6 picks don't play for the team that drafted them. That's crazy. It's a good reminder.
I show the hockey stick graph every draft season of where you find starters or good players, and it goes down to under 10% real quick.
Yeah. We've got Trev saying that I'm a company shill. I'm guessing you might be new, and if you are, welcome. I am 100% not a company shill. If I was, I wouldn't have just eviscerated Kevin O'Connell about the Carson Wentz thing earlier in the show. But I do think it's just important to have the context and the right information when you're having these conversations about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's draft. Look, it needs to be better, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's been great, but you're going to have on Sunday your last 4 first-round picks are going to be starting for your football team. Dallas Turner's been good so far this year. Jordan Addison's great. Donovan Jackson's already proving to be a solid starter year 1, and the real trick is going to be how does year 2 and 3 look. And J.J. McCarthy, who everybody's still sky high on as a quarterback. There's a real chance all 4 of those picks hit. And if they all hit, well, what are you going to have to do complain about Kwesi's draft prowess? It's just going to be that he doesn't hit on day 2. And a lot of those day 2 picks are tied up in TJ Hawkinson. Now, a couple of those day 2 picks are also tied up in Dallas Turner, indirectly because he made that trade to go up to 23rd overall to better secure a quarterback. But all these things compile. And when I went kind of boiled down to it, I looked at it going into this year's draft. I looked at every draft pick. I put them into 5 buckets. There were 5.5 successful picks, 8.5 failed picks, 8 to be determined. 1 was a tragedy. And that was Kyrie Jackson. I can't, in good conscience, call him a failed draft pick because he didn't play and he died in a tragic car accident. That is not what I would. You can't consider that anything else other than, man, that's just a tragedy. And then TJ Hawkinson is 1 too, because guess what? You traded picks to get him. That matters when we're having this conversation. Hawkinson's been a very good player. And look, you're going to see online, people are like, trade Hawkinson, he's a bum. Look, they don't want him to just be a blocker. They want him to be out in the field and catching balls and doing the things that Tucker Kraft was doing last night for the Green Bay Packers. They can't because of schematic limitations at the moment. But guess what? O'Neal and Darrisaw are probably returning on Sunday. Guess what? Those limitations are going to go away. And I updated it with this year's draft.
It seems like there's been a decline since his injury.
Of what?
Of Hawkinson's play.
Oh, I'm going to be honest. No, I don't think there has been at all. Last year, his numbers, other than touchdowns, which touchdowns are very random, on a player-to-player basis, that's why I like to look at the total offensive touchdowns. And the Vikings on offense were good. So this year, I recalculated it. I've deemed that the Vikings have had 8.5 successful picks, 10.5 failed picks. One of those, the half, is Ed Ingram. Because, I mean, he's no longer on the team. The Vikings did trade him. They moved on, which could end up proving to be a mistake. We'll find out in time. But he didn't
get along, I guess, or meld well with Chris Cooper.
Well, it makes sense because of Ed Ingram's play style. It just doesn't fit how Cooper wanted to play. Ingram was aggressive. He wanted to go on.
He wanted to push the pile, just like I said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I deemed him half a successful pick because I thought he was most games he was a good starter, and you got 3 years of a good starter out of a guard. Yeah,
and for most plays, it was
fine.
the less than 5% of the plays that he when he messed up spectacularly.
Yep. 7 of those are to be determined. 1 a tragedy, Kyrie Jackson. 1 TJ Hawkinson. So when I looked at it, I classified Michael Juergens as a hit. I classified Levi Drake Rodriguez as a hit. And I am now classified Will Reichert as a hit. Why? Levi Drake Rodriguez is like the 3rd most important defensive tackle on this team, is a 7th round pick. And it's not because they have to. He's earned it with his play. Michael Juergens has shown that he can be a spot starter and he can be a depth player. Guess what? For a 7th round pick, that's a hit. And that's where classifying some of this stuff needs to be taken into a little bit of perspective. Because if Michael Juergens was drafted in the 3rd round and he's barely a spot starter, we're having a different conversation. But he's a 7th round pick. And he had a really good game against the Bengals. A game good enough where we talked about on the show, is this going to be the game where they look at and decide, hey, we're going to move on from Ryan Kelly because we think we can give the job to Juergens? We had that talk. Now, he has played a little bit since then. Hasn't gone swimmingly. The Steelers game was a little rough. Steelers game was rough for everybody. But those things all compile. And understanding how to classify those players. Addison's a hit. I don't think anybody is going to be able to look you dead in the eye and say Addison was a miss. Absolutely a hit. Smashing hit. You got a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver at 23rd overall. Big win. Now, are you going to be able to get a Pro Bowl caliber output from Turner, McCarthy, and Jackson? We'll find out. Those three are all to be determined. It's way too early to know. I think Turner's trending. Turner and Jackson, I think, are trending toward being hits.
Now, the other asks, how many starters did Kwesi draft? Riker,
so,
Addison, Jackson.
It depends on how you're classifying some of this and what you're considering a starter, because some of that is going to be down to semantics and personnel groupings. I would argue Jalen Nailor's a starter because he in 11 personnel, he's the guy. And the Vikings run a lot of 11 personnel. So I would classify that as a starter. I would also classify Levi Drake Rodriguez right now as a starter. So now you're looking at 5. Now, that's not enough. And I'm not going to sit here and say that he's been this phenomenal GM when it comes to drafting, but he's been better than the perception is being painted. And that was my whole point with this article.
Ed Ingram was a starter.
Yeah. And I would have argued that they still should have given him another chance, but I also understand, hey, you know what? You got to move on. And that's okay. Because you know what? I had conviction, I had belief. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be right all the time. That doesn't mean that you're right now. That you can make different decisions, and that's okay. Like Jay Ward to me is still he's leaning towards being a failed pick, but he's a quality special teamer and a good depth guy. And he's only in year 3. Mekhi Blackmon is a weird one, and I just don't understand how he fell so far out of favor with the defensive coaching staff. I don't think he's been a world beater in Indianapolis, but he does have the 2 interceptions, and that's what sticks out in people's minds. Interceptions.
And he's hurt again.
Yeah. But
if you consider the starters, you go rounds 1 through 3. And there's only, if we go back to 2022,
it's just Addison.
It's just Addison.
You have, in that span, you only have one.
He was 2023.
You have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds in 22. They all bombed. And my big thing is with 22 is, look, he saw it. He learned his lesson. He's talked about it. His process has significantly changed. So I view that as an outlier. It's still part of the resume, and it still sucks. And it's why the team is in this position where they could have younger players really peaking right now, but they don't. It's just Nailor. 23, they only had 2 picks in the top 102. Mekhi Blackmon got traded after tearing his ACL, and Jordan Addison's one of the best young receivers in football. 2024, they have just McCarthy and Turner. Kyrie Jackson was picked at 108. Then you don't have a pick until the top of the 6th round with Walter Rouse. 25, you had Donovan Jackson, and then Ty Felton's pick 102. And that's a long-term play. He is, in theory, going to take over for Jalen Nailor next year. That's why they took him in the 3rd round. I would have taken Quincy Riley, who had an interception the other day. But that's just me. His drafting needs to improve. It needs to be better. And I think now that he has, and some of those completely self-inflicted, he's going to have those day 2 picks. In this draft, I'm guessing he's going to have like 10 or 11 picks by the time he actually finishes. Those guys, he's got to have some hits. We're going to have at least 9. That includes the Sam Darnold pick. We're not going to lose the Sam Darnold pick. We may not get one for Daniel Jones and Cam Robinson based on playtime incentives. Basically, Eric Wilson, if Eric Wilson gets hurt, we'll get another pick. Or if they bench him. Eric Wilson's going to cost the Vikings a pick. Straight up. Because he's playing too many snaps. The way the compensatory formula works is it ranks you by how much your average annual value is in your contract. And then you get to add the number of your percentage of snaps on the offense or defensive side of the football. He's playing a lot of snaps, so that number's gone up. But he's also on the fringes of not counting toward the formula. Let's pull it up and see how close he is to the fringes. Because, yeah, right now, yeah, he doesn't count right now, but compensatory formula.
Well, you do that. I asked the robot, i.e. Grok. I put in a bunch of data on his drafts and everything else Kwesi's done. And I asked, where does he rank amongst the rest of the league's GMs? And I'll bet everybody would be surprised what the answers came out. They source CBS Sports is saying top 10. He's promising. Extensions show signal trust. Free agency savvy offsets his drafts. Obviously not this year, but hey. NBC says 13th. McCarthy sit out questions, value, and mixed hits. NFL Spin Zone says 7th. Hinges on McCarthy. Strong wide receiver picks. Makes sense. NFL Trade Rumors 10th. Riser from the Browns. 2025 O-line focus smart. Now, has it worked? No, it hasn't because of all the injuries. And ESPN Power Rankings have mid. Aging roster risks needs youth infusion. So I would give him a mid-round grade for a GM overall.
I would give him a B or B plus. I think there are obvious flaws, but at the end of the day, he's finding value in free agency. He's signing advantageous contracts that keep the salary cap healthy. Yeah, and that's where a lot of people just kind of don't have, like, they don't factor this in. The team is winning, first off, and not only are they winning, but they're doing so with a healthy salary cap, and they're doing so with some value contracts. Like, Jonathan Garnett's only making $19 million a year. That dude should have a contract worth close to 30. Like, those things all matter. That's all part of being a general manager. Plus, the last 3 years of the NFLPA survey, it's not just ownership, it's management. They score incredibly high. All of it factors in. Being a GM is not just about drafting. I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is a fringe top 10 GM. He needs to start seeing results in the playoffs, and that youth infusion does need to happen. I think it's a complicated question, but if you only look at drafting, you're going to give him a much lower grade. But guess what? 37-21 as the GM. That is the only thing that matters. You are winning football games because of the product you are putting on the field. And before I hear but Rick Spielman gave him everything. There are like 8 guys left from the Rick Spielman era. This is Kwesi's team. Darrisaw was drafted, O'Neal was drafted, and Jefferson was drafted. Sure, that's fine. But you just can't be like, there's nobody else good on this football team. That's a bunch of shit. He's a fine GM. And if you fire him, who's going to be better? You have to find that guy. And guess what? Teams are firing GMs every 3 to 4 years. The Giants hired one of the hottest GM candidates, Joe Shane, 4 years ago. He's about on his way out the door. And I think the only reason he wasn't on his way out the door is because of ownership. 1, having loyalty, and 2, John Mara is dealing with cancer. Like, there are other things at play. Kwesi's been a fine GM. He's been a very good GM. Now he needs to iron out the issues and fix them, which, by process standpoint, I think he's doing a good job of. And he needs to start hitting on more of these early round picks. And he needs to start having more of these early round picks. And once he does, I think we're going to see a much better product. I think this is going to be a huge draft for him. He nails the first 3 picks. All of a sudden, Dave, we're talking about a completely different general manager. Like the perception is going to be way different.
Well, like nailing picks, old space weather guy. And do I know you, old space weather guy? I know somebody that was in a weather shop and did space weather as well back in the day. Says if McCarthy ends up being a hit, everyone shuts up about Kwesi. And he's not the only one. Cody mirrored that as well in the deal. And that's the most important part. Can he find that quarterback? The quarterback. The one with the it factor, the one that becomes their franchise and can make up for deficiencies.
Yeah.
Spielman never could.
Here's my question, though. How much is going to go on Kevin O'Connell versus how much is going to go on to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah for the quarterback selection? And I think that's a really interesting topic of conversation. How much credit is Kevin O'Connell going to get? And then because it feels to me from a perception of the fan base that Kwesi is going to get the blame and KOC is going to get the credit. You can't have it both ways. Whoever gets the blame should also get the credit. So you need to also parse that out. So if the quarterback fails, what if Kevin O'Connell gets fired and Kwesi keeps his job because so much of that was, this is what Kevin O'Connell wanted, and we gave him authority to make that decision. But then again, you're the GM. You gave him the authority to make that decision, so it's still on you. If McCarthy doesn't work out, that's going to be the $1 million question and how the Wilfs decide to move forward if they don't let them keep their jobs, which is a real possibility. So I think the whole construct of this is, look, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been a B to B plus general manager. He's completely fixed the health of the salary cap. He has done a fantastic job of finding talent, even if it hasn't all been through draft picks. Like, he had one of the best free agencies ever last year. Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman, Aaron Jones, and Sam Darnold. Tremendous. And they're winning. The competitive rebuild wasn't just shtick. It worked. 37-21 in year 4. I'm sorry. I don't see how you can look at that and be like anything else other than that's good. Still issues to fix, which is why it's not any higher than a B or a B plus, but it's good.
Yeah, could be. Mateo, I appreciate that, buddy. What? Hey, it is. We're doing better than Chicago overall over the 4 years now. They're doing better this year, but they still have plenty of time to choke it up.
Who'd you rather be, the Vikings or the Bears right now? I'd rather be the Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, even if McCarthy doesn't work out,
be winning like Detroit is, or even that team from Wisconsin, and then go to hell. By the way,
I think the tough part about the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah thing is Brad Holmes has been so good at identifying talent and maximizing their draft picks, where it just makes us look even worse. Brad Holmes is on a heater. He's going to cool down. It is not going to keep up at this rate. It just, when you look at historical data, he is not going to keep this up. Rick Spielman was on a heater for a little bit. He cooled down. Brad Holmes will cool down. So I think you need more from Kwesi, but it's also hard to be like mad at the position he's put you in, because the position is still pretty good. They got some things to fix out and iron out on the field, and we'll see what happens on Sunday. But I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has done a fine job.
Now, we do get Richard saying competitive rebuild didn't work. If it worked, we would be improving, not regressing.
Yeah, I get it. It's been a tough year. And it's also one of the reasons why it's so hard to win in the National Football League consistently. Like, they've gotten into close games and they haven't pulled them all out. I don't like to just use you're just going to regress in one-score games, so you're going to be worse next year. I think that's a load of shit because you just can't be like, if they're in 12 one-score games, you're not going to win 11 of them. They're going to win like 6. How about let's give some real analysis?
I want to highlight this. This is a great suggestion by Purple Tier since 61. How about the NDSU O-line coach?
I don't know the NDSU O-line coach, so
but
I don't know how long he's been there.
Cranks out professional O-linemen across the board. They're obviously doing something right.
Yeah. His name is Dylan Chmura.
And they're winning championships. Or coming close to it every year.
He's been the headline or the O-line coach since 2005. I think some of it is schools like NDSU, Montana State, and South Dakota State. They get the Iowa farm boys where other schools overlook them because they're not hyper athletes, but they can just move you and destroy you. And they lean into that. And I think that works.
That's what an O-line should do. Move people, move the masses.
I agree, but does that because you're prioritizing players that are overlooked, does that all of a sudden make you a great O-line coach? Or are you just asking your players to do what they're good at? I think that in itself is a difficult question. And one of the reasons why like it's just hard to identify O-line coaches because how much of it is the talent? How much of them is the coaching? That's why there's so few like O-line coach hires that end up being really good. It's hard. But the vibe of the theory, I completely understand. Hey, go get a guy who's at a place that has a really good O-line. But I'll leave with this, and then we're gonna wrap up the show. That's also how you end up with that Donatel. So process wise, you got to be careful because they're like, hey, I want a Vic Fangio. I want Vic Fangio defense.
They settled for a second, not the Vic Fangio.
But that's what I mean. You got to be careful with that process too. You got to make sure you're hiring the right coach. I hope they find him. Or I hope Chris Cooper turns it around because they need some help.
Now, we have one more topic to discuss, trade deadline candidates.
Ah, yes, the trade deadline. I had forgotten about the trade deadline. Look, the Vikings have almost nobody to trade. And I'll do a rapid fire if you want to go look. I only listed 4 guys, one of whom I think they should trade. That's Javon Hargrave. Just get what you can for him. Get the $4 million guaranteed off the books for next year. And look, Jalen Redmond just outplayed him. So is Levi Drake Rodriguez. Then the other 3 are Jonathan Allen, I think, is a bigger wild card, but he's not like, oh my gosh. Then you have TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison, who I really don't believe will be traded. But they've been names thrown around. But the Vikings don't really have any expiring contracts of players that you'd want to trade. You don't have guys like Roger McCreary just got traded to the Rams. He's on an expiring contract. He got a 5th and a 6th round pick. We don't have those guys. We don't have guys on expirings. That makes it hard.
Hawkinson to dump his salary.
That's not an expiring contract though. I also don't think they'll move him. I don't think they'll move him, and I don't think they should move him. Like, he's still really good football player. If you move him, it would be a good cost cutting move, but you need to get some sincere capital back. The capital the Vikings essentially gave up to go get Hawkinson was about pick 75. So that's what I would want back, around pick 75. O'Neal's an interesting one. He has one more year left on his contract, but you can save a ton of money by moving him, but then you'd have to replace him. Replacing him ain't easy. And he's only 30. Like, he's still young. He's still got like 6-7 years of probably high level play left. So I think the Vikings at the deadline are probably going to stay put unless they make a move to get like a Kirk Cousins as a backup. That'd be the only thing I can think of. Was that a good move? No. Will they? You never know. I just want the trade deadline to get here and pass.
Now, every once in a while, Tyler asks me to pre-work up a thumbnail to have it ready in case it happens. I pre-worked up. He asked me to pre-work up Kirk Cousins. So, not to worry. They never come true. So.
Hey, it has come true once or twice.
Once or twice, but that's most of the time they do not.
Yeah. Rumors fly all the time. We see with draft season where you hear one thing and half the time it's smoke, half the time it's real. You just don't know. But you never know with Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell. You just don't. But that's going to be our show today. We'll be back on Thursday with this show. I believe Dave is hosting Who Will Be King on Wednesday.
Yes, I am.
And X's and SKOLs probably won't be live, but is it to be determined on when that will post? I need to talk to Luke and Dave and get a time kind of squared away for when we'll record, especially because I have a busy schedule on Wednesday. And then Saturday, 2 old bloggers back at 10:05 Central Time, leading you into college football kickoff. And then Sunday, we'll be live at a 2-minute warning, and we'll get to restart it all over again. Thank you guys so much for being here. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for those notifications. And when this live stream is done, leave us a comment on there too. Help us continue to build the algorithm and spread this show to everybody else. And if you're on podcast, leave us a 5-star review.
Yes.
I'm Tyler. He's Dave. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching the Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!